Now to Yemen, where the shift is now to the capital of Sana'a. Tahrir is the main square in the city. It is here that in 2011, President Saleh's supporters and his detractors clashed during the beginning of the Yemen uprising. Well, this weekend on Sunday, Tahrir Square became once again the protagonist of the very rare news coming out of Yemen. Police dragged a 41-year-old man, his name is Mohammed al-Maghrabi, to the middle of that square. Now, he was found guilty, allegedly accused of murder and raping a 3-year-old baby. Tahrir Square was meant to be his execution point. He was made to lie there on the ground on a blue plastic sheet after a police officer shot him dead. It happened in front of hundreds of people who gathered there to witness the first public execution in the city since 2009, many of them whipping out their cell phones, shooting pictures and capturing videos. The execution was meant to be public and was carried out by forces belonging to the Houthi rebels. Let's now go to our correspondent Daniele Pagani, who spent extensive time reporting on the ground in West Asia. Daniele, what type of a precedent do we think this is? I mean, why this public execution, perhaps deterring other attackers in the near future? What do we make of it?
Certainly that is one of the reasons. Of course, a public execution is always, in history it has always been, because it's an attempt from the ruling forces to discourage people to commit certain kind of crimes. In this very case, perhaps we can also say that the Houthi rebels, when they started their rebellion, they advocated, they claimed to be the only honest force in a country which they perceived as completely and totally corrupt. So they have represented themselves as fearless warriors for justice, I would say. So this is perhaps something that goes along with that narrative. They need also to show something to the people in order to back their words. So two reasons. One, to discourage people to committing crimes. The man was accused and then found guilty of raping a 3-year-old baby. And the second reason is because they need to perpetrate the narrative as, I would call them, warriors for justice and cleanness of the Yemeni society. Of course, with their very own, at least controversial methodologies.
And Daniele, what exactly is the situation there on the ground in Yemen? We don't hear a whole lot of news coming out of there. I mean, why is that the case? What's the political landscape there?
Well, see, Archit, that is a major problem, especially for a person like me covering West Asia and being a war reporter. So Yemen is completely off limits for the media, but not only for the media. Even the NGOs, international NGOs and human rights organizations are not allowed to enter the country. Just more or less 10 days back, a United Nations flight was stopped, was forced to the ground from the Saudi-led coalition in Djibouti, which is the closest country on the African shores, because there were journalists on board. So what is happening in Yemen is that we have majorly two factions fighting: the Houthi rebel, who are allegedly supported by Iran, and the coalition of the former president, who is supported by the by the Saudi-led coalition and the US giving external support. It is impossible for anyone to get into the country, so this is why we have very, very few news, and often we have news which are very difficult to at least, if not verify, at least to understand better. Like this news, we know that this person was executed in a public square, but we don't know how the trial was, we don't know who actually executed, who decided it, what is the story of this man. We know very little because no one is on the ground.
All right, well, speaking of the Houthi rebels, let's get some clarity on that. The Houthi rebels presented themselves as the sole force able to truly fight crime and corruption in the country. Their populist approach proved to be quite a success. In fact, they gathered a great consensus. Then they transformed this into an armed rebellion. And with alleged Iranian support, they managed to conquer nearly half of the country. Back in 2015, a Saudi-led coalition decided to militarily support the former Yemeni president against what they perceived as an Iranian footprint in their very own land. Yemen is the southernmost country in the Arabian Peninsula, a place the Saudi royal family traditionally considers as its own. The U.S. decided to support the Saudi-led coalition on the base of the so-called war on terror. Al-Qaeda in the Arabic Peninsula has a strong presence in Yemen, making the scenario even more grim for the local population. It was the beginning of the Yemen conflict, one of the most unreported wars in recent times. Yemen makes it to the news only when tragedies happen, but the truth is that no international organizations, be it the media or humanitarian aid agencies, are on the ground. Yemen has always been the poorest among its Arab countries and is suffering in silence in what is being dubbed as one of the worst humanitarian crises. The Saudi-led coalition is not letting anyone get access to a country now entering its third year of war. So quite a bit of a political drama unfolding in Yemen. Let's go back to Daniele Pagani. Daniele, we also want to talk about Al-Qaeda, the footprint that it perhaps has in the country. How big and how prevalent is that, if at all?
Unfortunately, quite big, Arjit, I would say. So we have to understand that Al-Qaeda is a Sunni extremist organization. So what happens? These sort of organizations do flourish when there is turmoil, especially when there is sectarian turmoil. So the Yemeni war didn't start as a war between the Shia and the Sunni. The Houthi rebels have been part of this small little country for ages. They have always been a minority. They have always claimed their right to participate into politics, but it was not majorly about sectarian. It was mostly divided on a sort of a tribal fight. But when this war became sectarian, so when Iran started pitching in and supporting directly and indirectly the Houthi rebel, and when the Saudi-led coalition, which is of course a majorly Sunni coalition, started supporting the former president, then the conflict became sectarian. And when a conflict becomes sectarian, organizations like Al-Qaeda build their propaganda against the Shia communities, so the Houthi rebels. It always happens, it is always the same story. We can draw easily a parallel with Iraq, when Al-Qaeda became very, very strong after the majority Shia community of the country, Iraq, started gaining more and more power after the capitulation of Saddam Hussein. It happened the same, because the Sunni part of the population feels threatened by, let's call, a Shia wave which tries to rule over the country. Therefore, they start relying on Al-Qaeda. Plus, Al-Qaeda is a very clever organization. They know very much how to start working on a sort of a local basis. They intermingle with the local networks, and they follow local customs, they follow local traditions, so they are very good. They are a sort of a chameleon organization, I would say. And in Yemen there is no one to stop them right now, because on the ground, except the Houthi rebels and the few soldiers there on the president's side, there is no one directly fighting Al-Qaeda.
All right, Daniele, we'll come back to the conversation about West Asia in just a minute, but that wraps up this discussion on Yemen. Thanks for your insights.